You keep hesitating, you keep overthinking, you keep questioning your own instincts, and it's destroying you from the inside out. Every day, you wake up with ideas, with desires, with plans. But then, doubt creeps in. Uncertainty floods your mind. And before you even move, you've already convinced yourself not to act. That is how men die. Not in battle, not in poverty, but in indecision. You're stuck. You know exactly what you want, but you won't decide. And the truth is, if you don't learn how to make important decisions with clarity, with speed, with power, you will live your whole life watching other men win, other men take action, other men rise, but you'll stay behind, thinking, waiting, doubting. Let me tell you something no one told you. Indecision is the assassin of greatness. And I, Napoleon Hill, said it clearly. Successful people make decisions quickly and change them very slowly, if ever. Because power belongs to the man who moves, not to the man who hesitates. So ask yourself, how many opportunities have you already buried under hesitation? How many important decisions have you delayed while waiting for the perfect sign, the perfect moment, the perfect certainty? That moment never comes, because it's not about the situation. It's about you, your character, your clarity, your fire. And until you conquer the habit of indecision, you will never feel peace. Because the man who doubts himself never sleeps right. He lays awake wondering if he missed something. He tortures himself with what-ifs. He obsesses over paths he never walked. But the man who decides, he may fail, he may stumble, he may lose, but he sleeps like a warrior because he acted, because he chose. This is the beginning of everything. And if you're still watching this, if this truth already struck a nerve in you, if you know you've been drowning in overthinking, then this is your wake-up call. This video isn't about inspiration. It's about execution. It's about reprogramming your core. It's about destroying the mental habits that keep you stuck. And from now on, you will become a man who decides, because when you don't decide, you're still making a decision. You're deciding to stay in chains. And that ends today. Now I want you to pause this for 10 seconds. Comment below with brutal honesty. What's one decision you've been avoiding? Write it, declare it, face it, because hiding it only gives it more power. But speaking it aloud breaks the curse. And I want you to hear me on this. The ability to make important decisions is not a talent, it's not genetic, it's a habit, it's a muscle, it's a discipline. And I'm going to show you how to train it. But first, if this first part already opened your eyes, if it felt like I was talking directly to your gut, share this video. Send it to a man you know is stuck, a man who's watching life pass him by, a man who needs to hear what you just heard. And if you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever felt weak for not acting, if you've ever sat in silence while your dreams decayed, then hit the like button right now. Not for me, for yourself, to mark this moment as the shift, the exact second you stop playing small. And one more thing, subscribe to this channel. Why? Because this isn't a motivational page. This is discipline. This is power. This is the mind of Napoleon Hill brought to life, raw, direct, and unforgiving. And what's coming next in this video will rewire how you approach every decision for the rest of your life. You've hesitated long enough. Now you decide, and I'll show you how. You think clarity comes before action. You believe that if you wait long enough, if you gather enough information, if you consult enough people, the right answer will suddenly appear. But let me break that illusion for you. Clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. This is one of the most painful lessons every man must learn. You do not decide your way into confidence. You act your way into confidence. The man who is paralyzed by doubt is usually the man who worships perfection. He believes every decision must be right, every move must be safe, every outcome must be certain. But life does not reward the perfect. It rewards the bold. It rewards the man who chooses direction over hesitation, the man who moves forward while others stay frozen. I, Napoleon Hill, devoted my life to understanding success. And one truth I found over and over again: indecision is the enemy of wealth, the destroyer of relationships, and the silent killer of ambition. You cannot afford to sit still. You cannot afford to keep thinking about it. You cannot afford to keep saying, "I'll decide tomorrow," because tomorrow becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes your identity. So let's be real. You already know the decision you need to make. You know it right now. It's been haunting you. It's been following you from room to room. It's the reason you can't relax. It's the reason your confidence is crumbling. It's the reason you keep numbing yourself with distractions. And here's what you need to hear. Not deciding is the worst decision of all, because it keeps you in limbo. And limbo is torture. In limbo, you can't grow. In limbo, you can't commit. In limbo, you live with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And that tension, it breaks men. The most successful men in history, they were not the smartest. They were not the most talented, but they were the most decisive. They understood that most decisions can be corrected, but hesitation, it becomes a lifestyle. So how do you break that? You stop waiting for certainty. You stop asking for signs. You stop outsourcing your power to circumstances. You start deciding. Because every decision you make builds the muscle. Every act of clarity rewires your identity. You begin to see yourself differently. You begin to walk taller. You begin to build momentum. And momentum is everything. Once you have momentum, you don't need motivation. You don't need external validation. You don't need to feel ready, because the engine is already running. So ask yourself right now, what decision have you been avoiding? What choice keeps showing up in your mind at 2 a.m.? What path are you too afraid to commit to? Write it down. Don't hide from it. Don't negotiate with it. Don't pretend it's complicated, because the truth is, you already know what to do. You just don't want to pay the price of doing it. And that's where men stay stuck, not in confusion, but in cowardice. Yes, I said it. Cowardice. Because deep down, you're afraid that making the wrong decision will expose you. You're afraid of failing. You're afraid of judgment. You're afraid of closing one door and never seeing what was behind it. But here's what you must understand. Every door you don't close keeps you from walking through the one that matters. You can't move forward while dragging dead options behind you. You must cut. You must choose. You must decide. That is what power looks like. Not certainty, but commitment. And once you commit, the universe rearranges itself. People show up. Opportunities align, but only after you make the move. Now, if this truth is burning inside your chest right now, comment below. Tell me, what's one decision you're committing to today? Declare it. Own it. Don't let the moment pass. And if this video is already waking something up in you, if you're feeling the weight of years of hesitation cracking off your shoulders, share this video. Send it to the man who's still waiting, still thinking, still hoping clarity will just fall from the sky. Be the reason he stops hesitating. And if you're serious about changing this pattern, if you're ready to be the kind of man who makes important decisions without fear, like this video, not for the algorithm, but as your first act of decision, your first public yes to power. And finally, subscribe to this channel, because this is not just content, this is training. This is how we build kings. This is where Napoleon Hill's fire lives on, not in theory, but in action. And what's coming next will give you the step-by-step to make important decisions faster, with more confidence and without regret. This is your time. You've waited long enough. Now we build the man who decides. There's a myth that smart men make better decisions, but that's a lie. The truth, the best decisions don't come from intelligence. They come from inner certainty. And certainty is not something you're born with. It's something you build. Most men wait until they feel certain, but emotions lie, feelings change. Confidence doesn't fall from the sky, it rises from your decisions. And until you understand that, you'll keep circling the same fears, asking the same questions, postponing the same important decisions. But let me give it to you straight. Uncertainty is not your enemy. It's your fuel. Every man who ever achieved anything massive stood at the edge of doubt and jumped anyway. That's what I taught again and again in my work. Napoleon Hill didn't write about fairy tales. I wrote about fire, about power, about deciding, even when the ground beneath you shakes. So here's what you need to burn into your mind. You don't become decisive by eliminating doubt. You become decisive by acting through it. Because clarity is on the other side of action. You won't get it by reading another book. You won't get it by asking 5 more friends. You won't get it by watching 1 more video. You'll only get it when you move. Now let's break down the cost of indecision. Every day you delay an important decision, you weaken your identity because your brain is watching. Every time you hesitate, you're teaching yourself, I don't trust my judgment. And if you don't trust yourself, why would anyone else? Your clients won't, your team won't, your family won't, because energy doesn't lie. You can say all the right things, but if you carry the energy of hesitation, people will feel it, and they'll pull back, they'll doubt you, they'll match your uncertainty with silence. That's how businesses die, that's how relationships fade, that's how leaders lose their edge. All because they couldn't decide. Now think back, how many moments in your life were defined not by what you did, but by what you didn't do? How many opportunities slipped because you waited? And if you could go back, what would you say to that version of yourself? Would you tell him to wait a little longer? Or would you slap him and say, move, now? That's what this video is for, that slap, that wake up, that internal rebellion. Because you're done waiting, you're done doubting. You're done losing years to indecision. From this point forward, you commit to a new identity, the man who moves with force. Not recklessness, but calculated aggression. You see, power doesn't come from guessing, it comes from commitment. Once you choose, everything shifts. Your brain gets to work, your energy aligns, your path clears. But none of that happens until you decide. And now, I want you to think, what would your life look like if you were 10 times more decisive? How would your business shift? How would your body look? How would your confidence grow? What doors would open if you just stopped delaying? That's the man you're building now. So let's do this. Comment below right now. What's one area of your life where you will stop hesitating starting today? Write it. Own it. Let it echo in this community of warriors. And if this part shook you, share this video. Send it to a man who's wasting his potential by overthinking every move. Be the reason he finally breaks the cycle. And if you're still here, if this message is tattooing itself into your mind, like this video. Not for likes, for legacy, for self-respect. And lastly, subscribe to this channel, because this is where hesitation dies, where decisive men are forged. Where Napoleon Hill's real philosophy is taught like fire, no fluff, no filters, just force. You've waited long enough, now we build. Most men think indecision is harmless. They think waiting is wise. They think delaying a move is a sign of intelligence. But what they don't realize is that indecision is a disease. And like any disease, it spreads. It starts in small things. What should I eat? Should I send that message? Should I take that meeting? And before long, it infects everything. Your business, your relationships, your vision, your identity. You become the man who hesitates, who analyzes too long, who always needs a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth validation. But here's what I, Napoleon Hill, discovered after studying the most powerful men in history. Indecision is the silent killer of dreams, and decisiveness is the engine of dominance. The greats didn't wait for clarity. They created clarity through action. They didn't beg for reassurance. They bet on themselves. That's the shift you must make now, from external permission to internal power. Because no one is coming to save you. No one will ever know your vision as clearly as you. No one will feel your fire the way you do. And if you keep waiting for someone to agree with your dreams, you'll be waiting for the rest of your life. So let me say this clearly. The moment you hesitate, you surrender the battlefield, because the world doesn't pause for your indecision. It moves forward. It rewards the man who steps first, not the one who waits. Now ask yourself, how many opportunities have passed you by because you thought about them too long? And deeper than that, how much of your confidence has eroded because you keep proving to yourself that you don't trust your own judgment? That's what this is about. Every decision you avoid is a message to your subconscious. I'm not ready. I don't trust myself. I don't believe I can handle the outcome. And guess what? Your subconscious listens. And it begins to shape your identity around that belief. You become weaker with every delay. Every hesitation becomes another drop in the bucket of doubt, until one day, you don't even know what it feels like to move boldly anymore. But that ends here. From now on, you decide fast. You decide clear. You decide with fire in your chest and steel in your spine. And even if the outcome isn't perfect, you still win. Why? Because decisiveness builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence, and confidence builds dominance. So here's your new rule: decide, adjust, move, repeat. That's how kings rise, not by being right all the time, but by being relentless in direction. And if you're wondering, but what if I make the wrong decision? Let me answer that right now. You will. You will make wrong decisions. You will fail. You will miscalculate. But guess what? So did every great man you admire. So did every leader in every era. So did every champion. The difference? They learned. They adapted. They moved again. And that's why they're kings. And that's why most men stay followers, because they don't have the stomach for decisions. They don't have the mindset for uncertainty. They don't have the courage to leap. But you do. That's why you're still here. That's why this message is burning inside your soul, because you know this is the version of you that's been hiding, the decisive you, the fire-breathing you, the unstoppable you. Now bring him out. Comment below right now. What's one decision you'll make today, no matter what? Let the world feel your shift. Let other men be inspired by your fire. And if you felt this truth deep in your chest, share this video. Send it to the man who always hesitates, the man who's smart but slow, the man who needs to remember that action beats intelligence every single time. And if you're serious, if you're done with doubt, like this video, let your click be a decision. Let it be your declaration, I move now. And finally, subscribe to this channel, because this is where hesitation ends, where fire begins, where Napoleon Hill's legacy lives on in discipline, power, and action. You've waited long enough. Now build the man who decides. With precision, with clarity, with domination. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. The most powerful men you'll ever meet aren't the loudest. They're the most decisive. They don't talk about decisions. They don't ask 10 people for feedback. They don't sit in circles analyzing every outcome. They decide, and they move, because real decision is internal. It's quiet, it's sharp, it's final. That's the difference between men who lead and men who follow. Leaders make important decisions in silence. Followers make noise and delay. And I, Napoleon Hill, saw this pattern in every successful man I studied. They all had different talents, different resources, different education. But they all had one thing in common. They moved fast on the decisions that mattered. They understood that hesitation is a message, a signal of weakness, a permission slip for the world to ignore you. But when you decide quickly, with clarity, with direction, you become a magnet. People follow clarity, they submit to certainty, they surrender to leadership. And that starts with the decisions you make alone, in the dark, in silence, when no one's watching. That's where power is forged. Now I want you to think of your current life. Where are you leaking energy through indecision? Is it in your business, your relationships, your health, your money, your purpose? Because every delayed decision is a door that never opens. Every silent maybe is a loud no to your potential, and every time you ask someone else to choose for you, you give them your power, you give them your fire, you give them control over your destiny. But that ends now, because from this point forward, you become the man who doesn't delay. You speak less, you move more, you stop explaining your thoughts, and you start executing them. This is where strategy begins. This is where silence becomes lethal. Because when you stop broadcasting your doubts, you become unpredictable, you become unstoppable. Now let me ask you, what decision are you dragging through too many conversations? What situation are you thinking about more than acting on? What outcome are you trying to control with thoughts instead of commanding with action? Write it down. Be brutal. Be clear. And then comment below. What's one decision you've overanalyzed for too long that you're finally going to make? Declare it. Let this be your line in the sand. And if this message just hit you harder than any advice you've received in years, share this video. Send it to the man who talks more than he moves, who overthinks every path, who's waiting for clarity while life passes him by. And if you're nodding your head, if you feel this is exactly what you needed to hear, like this video, not for approval, but because every act of decisiveness, no matter how small, builds momentum, and momentum is everything. And finally, subscribe to this channel. Why? Because this is where men are trained to move, where action replaces doubt, where the fire of Napoleon Hill fuels every word, every lesson, every decision. You're not here to watch, you're here to rise. And this is your next level. You've been silent long enough. Now it's time to decide in silence and dominate in action. Every man has a war inside, a silent conflict that no one else sees. And that war is between two voices, the voice that says move and the voice that says wait. One leads to greatness, the other leads to regret. And here's the brutal truth. The longer you hesitate, the louder the weaker voice becomes. It starts as a whisper, but over time, it becomes your inner law. It becomes the default. It becomes the reason you stay stuck, the reason you feel anxious, the reason you keep questioning yourself. I've seen this pattern destroy thousands of men, and what they all had in common, they never learned how to win the war of important decisions. But I, Napoleon Hill, built an entire philosophy around conquering that war, not with motivation, but with mental structure, with discipline, with fire. Because if you wait for confidence to appear before you decide, you'll never move. Confidence is the reward of decision, not the prerequisite. Let me break this down clearly. When you face a decision, especially a big one, your mind immediately starts to negotiate. What if this goes wrong? What will people think? What if I fail? But that negotiation is a trap. It's a system designed to protect your ego, not your future. And the man who listens to that voice, he becomes passive, he becomes reactive, he becomes forgettable. But the man who decides despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the pressure, that man becomes inevitable. Let me ask you, how many times have you felt the pull to act and talked yourself out of it? How many decisions have you buried because your emotions hijacked your clarity? You thought you were being careful, but you were actually surrendering your power. Here's what you need to understand. Your mind will always resist bold moves. It will always invent reasons to stay where it's comfortable. That's its job. But your mission is to override that system. To choose in alignment with your vision, not your feelings. Because the man who leads with emotion lives in chaos, but the man who leads with discipline lives in control. That's how you master important decisions. You disconnect from the emotional noise and anchor yourself in the outcome. Ask yourself, what kind of man do I want to become? And then ask, what decision aligns with that man? Then you move. Not perfectly, not confidently, but decisively, because decision is identity, and repetition of decision is transformation. Let's get practical. Here's a simple framework I taught privately to men seeking clarity. Decide who you want to be, not what you want to have, who you want to become. Write down the decision you're avoiding. Get it out of your head, because if it stays in your head, it grows in fear. Ask, what's the worst that could happen? Not emotionally, realistically. Define the consequences. Then ask, can I survive that? If the answer is yes, decide. If the answer is no, adjust. But move anyway. You'll never eliminate all risk. You'll never find a 100% guarantee. But guess what? Neither did the men who built empires. Neither did the kings who rewrote history. Neither did the warriors who walked into battles they couldn't predict. They didn't need certainty. They needed conviction. And so do you. Now reflect. What have you postponed this year? What decisions have you pushed to later? What life could you already be living if you had moved 6 months ago? Let that sting. Let that regret ignite something inside you, because you don't need another plan. You need a decision. And if this message is confronting you, if you're feeling the war in your chest right now, good. Because that means the weak voice is finally being challenged. And now it's your turn to speak back. Comment below right now. What's the most important decision you've avoided that you're now committed to making? Let it be known. Let your future self look back and thank you for this moment. And if this part of the video hit you like a storm, share it. Send it to a man who keeps circling his life like a shadow, a man who wants more but won't decide. Be the push he needs to take control. And if you're still watching, if this fire is exactly what you needed today, like this video, let it be your first victory. Your first yes to the new version of you. Your first act of alignment with the man you're building. And finally, subscribe to this channel, because this is not entertainment, this is immersion. This is Napoleon Hill for the men who are done living halfway. The mission continues. The decisions are coming. And you're becoming the man who never hesitates again. You've been trained to believe that hesitation is safe, that waiting equals wisdom, that not choosing is the smarter move. But I'm here to tell you, every moment you hesitate, you're bleeding power. Every second you delay an important decision, you're handing over the keys to your future. Not choosing is a choice, and it's almost always the wrong one. You think that by not deciding, you're protecting yourself from failure, from criticism, from discomfort. But what you're really doing is hiding. You're hiding from growth, hiding from responsibility, hiding from the man you know you could be if you just had the guts to move. That man is still there, by the way. He's just buried under layers of fear, overthinking, excuses, and stories you've told yourself so many times they now feel like truth. Let's cut through the noise. Every man who has ever achieved anything significant in life did so by making decisions that scared him. Decisions that weren't perfect. Decisions that came with risk. But they made them anyway. Because action creates power, and power never comes to the man who waits. Power goes to the one who steps into the unknown and claims his place. You don't become confident and then decide. You decide and then confidence shows up. You decide when your stomach is tight. You decide when your heart is pounding. You decide when every part of you wants to run. That's when it matters most. That's when you're building something that will never be taken from you. Because once you prove to yourself that you can choose under pressure, you never go back to who you were before. And let's be real, if you've been living with the habit of hesitation, you already know how it feels. The weight of not knowing. the anxiety that creeps in when you're avoiding the decision, the lack of direction, the second guessing, the late nights thinking about all the possible outcomes but doing nothing about them. That's not clarity. That's self-sabotage disguised as logic. It's easy to call it caution, easy to say you're thinking it through, but deep down, you know when you've crossed the line from preparation into procrastination. You feel it in your chest, you see it in your stagnation, you hear it in the way you explain to others why you're still considering your options. Now ask yourself, what has indecision cost you so far? Opportunities that came and went, relationships that faded because you couldn't commit, business moves that someone else made before you? How many times have you looked back and realized that your delay was the reason you missed your moment? And more importantly, how long are you going to tolerate that pattern? This isn't about recklessness. This isn't about jumping without thought. This is about aligning quickly with your core, about trusting your vision, about understanding that progress never belongs to the hesitant. It belongs to the man who's willing to take a stand, to bet on himself, to move when it matters. You want to master important decisions? Then start by mastering yourself, your emotions, your patterns, your mind, because the battlefield is not outside, it's inside. That's where the war is fought, and that's where the victories are won. The truth is, every important decision you avoid is tied to an identity you haven't claimed yet. You're still operating as the man you were, but the decision is calling you to be the man you're meant to be. That's why it feels hard. That's why it feels heavy, because you can't carry it with your current mindset. You need to level up before you can hold the weight of that next step. And how do you level up? You act, you step into it, you decide before you're ready. You let the discomfort forge you. And once you've made that decision, once you've crossed the line, you'll never go back, because something in you shifts. You become different, stronger, sharper, quieter, more dangerous. You start to feel the energy of power, not the loud, boastful kind, but the silent, centered, immovable kind, the kind that comes from knowing you've earned your place, from knowing you've stopped waiting for permission, from knowing that your life is now being shaped by your own will, not your fears. Let's take this deeper. What if the very thing you're afraid of is the exact thing that will transform you? What if the decision you've been avoiding is the portal to your next level? And what if every excuse you've made about timing, about information, about being ready, is just a smokescreen for fear? I've been there. I've seen men on the edge of breakthrough who walked away because the pressure was too much, but I've also seen men who leaned in, who felt the same fear, but made the call. And those are the men who changed everything, who built lives that others can't understand, who walk into rooms and don't need to explain themselves because the energy of decision surrounds them. That's the kind of man you're becoming, one decision at a time, one step, one commitment. One moment where you look fear in the face and say, I'm not asking anymore, I'm acting. And it doesn't stop with this one choice, because once you decide powerfully, your whole standard rises. The way you speak changes. The way you walk shifts. The way people respond to you transforms. Why? Because you've stepped out of confusion and into certainty. The world bends to men of certainty, not because they're always right, but because they're always clear. Clarity is magnetic. It draws people. It commands respect. And it starts with one thing, the ability to make important decisions quickly and with conviction. Now I want you to sit in this moment, not as a passive viewer, but as a man who's about to make a shift. A man who's done playing small, a man who's done drowning in options and analysis, a man who's ready to burn the bridge and move. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to claim your authority. You're going to write right now in the comments the decision you've been avoiding, the one that's been eating at you, the one that deep down you know is yours to make. Declare it. Let it echo. And if you know someone who's stuck in that same storm of hesitation, send him this video. Don't explain, just send it. Let the fire do the work. Let him feel the urgency. Let him see what clarity looks like. Then hit the like button. Not because you're impressed, but because this is your moment, your declaration, your line in the sand. And finally, if you haven't already, subscribe, not to get updates, but to join a mission, a brotherhood, a system built around the raw, unfiltered power of Napoleon Hill's philosophy, alive, tested and sharpened for the modern man. You don't need another reason to decide. You need to decide. And now you will. You're not tired because you're busy. You're tired because your mind is overworked with decisions you haven't made. Your fatigue doesn't come from action. It comes from hesitation. It comes from the weight of carrying unfinished choices, unclear intentions, and unspoken commitments. Your energy is leaking from the gaps between where you are and where you refuse to move. Every day you wake up, and before you even get out of bed, you're already at war. Not with the world, but with yourself. The moment your eyes open, the questions begin. Should I do it? Should I wait? Should I change? Should I speak? Should I leave? Should I go all in? And instead of answering them, you push them aside. You tell yourself, later. You distract yourself with tasks, notifications, errands, scrolling. But deep down, you know none of that is the problem. The real issue is that you're living in mental limbo. And the truth is, nothing drains a man more than unmade important decisions. When you decide, you feel lighter, you feel clearer, you walk different, you speak different, you sleep better, because your mind is no longer split, your energy is no longer scattered, your soul is no longer divided. The man who chooses wins, even when the outcome isn't perfect, because decision itself is a declaration of identity. It's you telling the world and yourself, this is where I stand. This is who I am. This is the path I choose. And there is power in that. Real power. The kind that can't be faked. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that walks into a room and owns the air. So the question is, why don't more men choose? Why do they dance around decisions for weeks, months, sometimes years? It's because they're afraid of consequences. But what they don't realize is that indecision has consequences too, massive ones. When you don't decide, you delay your growth, you delay your learning, you delay your momentum, and worse, you train yourself to tolerate mental chaos. You normalize the state of confusion, and before you know it, you've built a life not by intention, but by default. Not by strategy, but by survival. You weren't born to survive. You were born to build. You were born to command. You were born to lead. But you cannot lead if you cannot decide. You cannot build if you cannot move. You cannot create if you remain stuck in doubt. And I, Napoleon Hill, devoted my life to making this clear to every man who would listen. The world belongs to those who decide without apology, who decide without delay, who decide in the presence of fear, not the absence of it. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is the compass. Fear points to where your decision matters most. If it doesn't scare you, it doesn't stretch you. And if it doesn't stretch you, it won't elevate you. Every important decision in your life will be accompanied by fear. That's not the signal to stop. That's the signal to move. Because on the other side of that fear is the version of you that you've been pretending to be for too long. The focused one, the confident one, the decisive one, the powerful one. You don't become that man through more thinking. You don't become that man through endless planning. You become him by deciding, by stepping into the unknown, by trusting yourself when the outcome is still unclear. That's where transformation begins. That's where clarity is born. That's where confidence is built. Not before the decision, but after it. Let me ask you something. What would change in your life right now if you became radically decisive? What doors would open? What problems would disappear? What opportunities would you finally step into? What relationships would you fix or end? What business move would you make? What idea would you finally act on? What weight would fall off your shoulders if you simply said, "This is what I'm doing"? No more questions, no more hesitation. No more waiting? Sit with that. Let it burn. Let it expose the part of you that's been playing small, the part of you that's been hiding behind logic and pretending it's wisdom, the part of you that's been stalling, not because the timing wasn't right, but because your courage wasn't activated. That ends now, because from this moment on, you don't leave decisions open. You don't let them linger. You don't keep thinking about it. You get clear. You choose. You move. And if the choice doesn't work, you adjust. You learn. You course correct. But you never go back to being stuck. You never go back to the man who waits. That man is gone, buried in the moment you chose to live with conviction. So here's what I want you to do. Look at your life right now. Not in theory, not in general. Look at the real areas. Where are you delaying decisions? Where are you tolerating confusion? Where are you leaking energy every single day by not choosing? Find it. Identify it. Own it. Then write it in the comments. Make the choice real. Declare it with clarity. Speak it into existence. And then take the next step. Share this message with a man who's stuck. A man who's tired of feeling like his life is on pause. A man who knows deep down that the only thing standing between him and the life he wants is a series of decisions he hasn't made. Be the reason he wakes up. Be the reason he moves. Be the reason he reclaims his power. If you felt this message cut deep, if it stripped away your excuses, if it pulled the truth out of you, then like this video, not for validation, but for alignment. Let that like be your first act of decision, your first yes to clarity, your first move toward the life you know you're meant to build. And finally, subscribe to this channel, because this isn't entertainment. This is a battleground, a mental war zone, a fire built on the timeless truths of Napoleon Hill. Here, we don't sugarcoat. We don't hold hands. We build kings. And every video, every word, every lesson is a tool for you to forge your next level. No more delays, no more hesitation, no more excuses. Decide and don't look back. You say you want change. You say you want growth. You say you want power. But every time life hands you a choice that could take you there, you freeze. You stall. You hesitate. You drown yourself in options, in theories, in analysis. But deep down, you already know. You know exactly what needs to be done. You're not confused. You're just afraid of what that decision will demand from you. You're afraid of losing what's familiar, afraid of disappointing someone, afraid of what people will say, afraid of stepping into the unknown and finding out who you really are when you can't hide behind indecision anymore. But here's the truth that every powerful man must face. If you don't make important decisions when they appear, they will make you. And when life decides for you, it won't be on your terms. It will be messy, it will be painful, and it will remind you that you were never in control to begin with. You were just avoiding responsibility. You think staying neutral keeps you safe, but all it does is keep you invisible. You think waiting will bring you clarity, but all it does is exhaust your energy. You think putting off decisions is harmless, but every day you delay, you pay with your confidence. You shrink. You question yourself. You start seeing the world through the eyes of a man who can't commit, and that vision is blurry. That vision is weak. That vision kills greatness. The longer you avoid decisions, the more you normalize weakness, the more you tolerate uncertainty. And eventually it doesn't feel like hesitation anymore. It just feels like who you are. But you were not born to hesitate. You were born to command, and command begins with decision. It's not about being reckless. It's not about jumping without thinking. It's about building a system inside your mind where you don't allow yourself to spiral in confusion. It's about developing the habit of clarity. And clarity is not a gift, it's a discipline. You sit down, you confront the options, you get brutally honest about what aligns with your vision and what doesn't. And you cut. You eliminate. You execute. Not when you feel like it. Not when you get a sign. Not when the world gives you permission. You do it now. Because now is the only time you actually have power. Everything else is a lie. Tomorrow is a lie. Later is a lie. When you're ready is a lie. The man who waits for readiness is a slave to time. The man who creates readiness through action is the one who builds empires. Ask yourself something real right now. When you think about the life you want, who do you see? What kind of man is he? How does he speak? How does he move? What kind of decisions does he make? And then look in the mirror. Do your current decisions match that man? Or are you still negotiating with fear, still postponing your potential, still hoping that something or someone will push you hard enough to make the leap for you? That's not strength. That's weakness in disguise, and you already know it. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not filled with more information. It's filled with decisions. The bridge is built one decision at a time. Decisions you're avoiding. Conversations you're postponing, moves you're afraid to make. That's the truth, and no matter how much you try to dress it up in logic and planning, your soul knows when you're being a coward. It knows when you're choosing comfort over growth. It knows when you're lying to yourself. But the good news is this: the moment you decide, you shift. Your energy changes, your voice deepens, your posture strengthens, people around you feel it. And the world begins to respond differently. Because the world doesn't follow the loud, it follows the certain. And certainty is not a gift, it's a product, a result. It's born from thousands of decisions stacked on top of each other. From a man who said yes to pressure, yes to risk, yes to the fire of responsibility, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. There's a reason most men never reach their potential. It's not because they're not smart enough. It's not because they didn't get the right opportunities. It's because they never learned how to decide. And every opportunity that came their way died in the graveyard of maybe. Every relationship that could have become something powerful was lost in the silence of indecision. Every vision that had the potential to shift everything was smothered by the fear of commitment. But that won't be your story. Not if you choose right now to become a man of decision, a man who acts, a man who moves. A man who stops explaining himself and starts living aligned with his deepest truth. And that truth is this: you've been playing small, you've been hiding, you've been waiting for certainty, but what you really need is not more time. You need to trust yourself. You need to remember who you are. You need to make the decisions that scare you, the ones that stretch you, the ones that break your patterns and force you to become someone stronger, wiser, more dangerous. Because on the other side of those decisions is the life you say you want, but you'll never access it by thinking. You'll only access it by choosing. So I'm asking you now, what will you choose? Will you choose clarity or confusion? Will you choose movement or stagnation? Will you choose the man you are or the man you're called to become? Only one of those choices leads to power. The rest lead to regret. And if you've made it this far, then deep down, you already know the answer. So don't let this be just another video you watch. Let this be the line in the sand, the turning point. The day you stopped tolerating hesitation and started building your future with bold, intentional, irreversible decisions. And if this message lit something inside of you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Send it to a man who needs to hear this right now. Someone you care about. Someone who's been circling the same choices for too long. Be the force that helps him decide. And if you're truly ready to step into your next level, then like this video right now. Let it be your first act of alignment, your first micro decision in the direction of power. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Not just to get more videos, but to stay immersed in this energy, this truth, this mission, the mission of building yourself into the kind of man that others can't ignore. Not because you're loud, but because your presence carries the weight of decisions made in silence. That's the man you're becoming. And now it's time to live like it. There is a moment in every man's life when everything shifts. A moment when he stops waiting, stops questioning, stops explaining. A moment when he finally decides that the version of himself he's been tolerating is no longer acceptable. And in that moment, something ancient wakes up inside him. A fire, a presence, a certainty. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. It's the quiet intensity of a man who knows who he is because he's earned it in silence, through pressure, through decisions made without applause, through actions taken without guarantees, through walking alone while others waited for permission. That's when the world begins to bend, not because it owes him anything, but because it has no choice when a man fully commits. You felt pieces of that version of you. Moments where you moved without overthinking. Moments where you made an important decision and everything aligned. Moments where you didn't ask if you were ready. You simply moved. And in those moments, you felt power. You felt peace. You felt clarity. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And now you know what's possible. Now you've tasted the life that waits on the other side of hesitation. But the question is, will you stay there? Or will you go back to the comfort of doubt? Will you sink back into that fog of indecision where everything is half-lived, half-committed, half-real? Or will you rise? Because rising isn't a moment, it's a lifestyle. It's a decision you make over and over again, in the small things, in the silent battles, in the thoughts you choose, in the words you refuse to speak, in the things you no longer tolerate, in the actions you take without anyone watching. That's where greatness is built. Not in the spotlight, not on the stage, but in the shadows, in the silence, in the fire of decisions made when no one else sees the weight you carry. And that's what separates men who are remembered from those who are forgotten. Those who are remembered chose the hard path, the narrow path, the path that demands clarity and punishes hesitation. They chose to live by decision, not emotion. They chose to lead, not follow, to build, not react, to stand, not explain. And now it's your turn. This isn't just another piece of content. This is a call, a command, a mirror. And the reflection staring back at you is asking one thing. Are you done hesitating? Are you done making excuses? Are you done delaying the man you were born to become? Because he's waiting. He's been waiting for years. And every day you delay, you bury him deeper. Every day you choose comfort, you move further from him. But he's not gone. He's just dormant. And now, in this moment, you have a choice. Wake him up or walk away. There is no middle. This entire video has been a confrontation, a stripping away of layers, a return to the core. And now, with nothing left to hide behind, you're faced with the rawest truth of all. Your life is a reflection of your decisions, not your dreams, not your intentions, not your potential, your decisions. And every decision either moves you toward power or away from it, toward purpose or away from it, toward the life you want or deeper into the one you've settled for. There is no neutral ground, not anymore. You know too much now. You've heard too much, felt too much, seen too much to go back to the way things were. The old strategies won't work. The old patterns won't protect you. The old identity will suffocate you. Because the moment you tasted clarity, you killed the version of you that could survive without it. So now you must choose, fully, finally, without looking back. You must become the man who no longer delays important decisions, the man who no longer feeds fear with silence, the man who speaks less and acts more, who thinks clearly, who moves intentionally, who builds relentlessly, and who no longer waits for life to give him answers, but extracts them through fire. Because you weren't meant for hesitation. You weren't built to live in maybe. You were built for force, for focus, for freedom. And freedom doesn't come from waiting. It comes from choosing. So choose. Choose discomfort over delay, purpose over pressure, vision over validation, fire over fear. From this day forward, your standard is different. Your mindset is unrecognizable. Your discipline is sharp. Your identity is clear. You are the man who decides. You are the man who moves. You are the man who doesn't flinch when life demands action. You are the man who stands taller when everything else collapses. And you built that, not by chance, but by choice, by thousands of choices, made in silence, made in solitude, made in strength. Now I want you to breathe, not shallow, deep, with the awareness that something just shifted, that you're not the same man who pressed play, that this moment is now a reference point, a marker, a declaration, a turning point, a before and after, and I want you to write it right now in the comments. What's the biggest decision this video helped you face? What clarity did it unlock? What path are you now walking that you couldn't walk before? Write it so that it's real, so that the world knows, so that you never forget. And if this message woke you up, if it slapped the doubt out of you, if it reminded you of who you really are, share it. Send it to another man who needs to remember, who needs to feel this fire, who needs to make that one decision he's been avoiding for years. Be the reason he finally moves. And like this video, not because it's popular, but because it's true. Because every second you listened, something inside you burned away, and what's left is the raw version of you that doesn't flinch, that doesn't ask for permission, that doesn't explain, that doesn't wait. And now subscribe, not just to follow, to train, to sharpen, to build, to walk with men who live by the fire of Napoleon Hill. Men who don't need external noise, because they've found internal certainty. Men who live in silence but move with force. You're not average, never were. And now, you'll never live like one again. You've been called, you've been confronted. Now, you've been claimed. The mission continues and you walk forward, unshakable, decisive, unstoppable.